Okay, hopefully you can see me well. Of course, my name is Kent, Crypto Kent, and the channel is still US San Diego. So I want to make a little bit of a video tonight, and I want to cover a couple things that I think a lot of people don't know. And I'm going to entitle this video, The Dirty Little Secrets About Money. And of course, this includes crypto too. So I'm going to just talk to people about what money really is, because so much of money influences our lives, but so few people understand the true meaning of money. And when I think of money, I think of not economists, not financial people, not accounting, none of those things, especially when I think of money on a national or global economy. I think of money as psychology. So when you see Fed Chairman Jerome Powell talking to us, he's not really talking to you like, I'm an economist and I'm trying to give a soft landing to the economy, or I'm trying to slow the economy down or pick it up. What he's doing is he's playing psychologist. He's trying to read, and he has, of course, the incredible power to control so much through the media and through what people say about, oh, inflation is off the charts, it's ridiculously high, we've got to control inflation. So he comes on and he's got to say something about, you know, we're going to slow the economy down, we're going to raise interest rates and everything like that. That's not decisions made by numbers. That's decisions made basically by psychology and what people think, and trying to keep people interested in doing something, interested in working, interested in creating more jobs, interested in doing things to stimulate the economy. And the way he does that is by telling people things they want to hear, or making it seem like it's a real game, that there's really something going on here. I think there's a Padre game going on over here. I hear people cheering. I don't know if it's the Padres or something else. Football. Wouldn't be football. Would it be? Yeah, maybe college football. So anyway, what Jerome Powell is trying to do is he's playing you psychology. He's playing psychologist. He's not playing economist, and he's not doing anything. The bottom line, and the dirty little secret about money is that money is created, and everybody knows this, especially in the internet age. Money is created by borrowing. And what happens when you borrow? You go in debt. And when you go in debt, you run up interest. And that is every dollar that we have, every dollar that's created in our economy, in our world today, was created for the sole purpose of keeping our economy growing, keeping inflation up, keeping inflation high. And that's something that's very interesting. The Federal Reserve, as much as they talk about not wanting inflation, they're the mass producers of inflation. They are the king of inflation, because everything they do is inflationary. Every time they borrow money, or whatever they need to borrow money or create money, they just go to Congress. Congress goes to the Federal Reserve. Federal Reserve creates the money out of anything it's borrowed. And so they're the creators of all this. And there's psychology behind that. Realistically, we are in a deflationary cycle, deflationary time, because of technology. And let me explain that to you for a second. So all the jobs that we've lost in the last 50 years, because we used to have people assembling automobiles on an assembly line. Now we have robots assembling automobiles on the assembly line. Like I said in my last video, we used to have people go around and read the meters and then record how much gas or electricity used. Now it's all done by satellite. And all this is getting to be more and more, and it'll be more and more of that in the future. There'll be less jobs for people to do. There'll be certain areas that will grow, but by and large, for the average person, the job market is continuing to go away, and will continue to go away for quite some time. And I'm going to tell you, you're going to see a huge decline in jobs when they get the technology down for driverless vehicles. So right now, if you look at where people are mostly employed in this world, this country, probably in the world, is through transportation. So people drive, everybody drives. We have trucks that deliver stuff. We have people that deliver Uber Eats, all this stuff. When they figure this out to the point, and they will, to where everything's done, someone just took a fender with the car. When they get everything done by some sort of driverless vehicle, there's going to be a ton of jobs go away, and this is not too far coming. And like in my case, when I was a kid, on the farm, we used to use tractors. When they get driverless tractors, and there's tractors out in the middle of the field, you can't really hurt too much, so that's going driverless. When you're in a 200 acre field and the tractor gets, even if it gets off track or goes out of it goes offline or loses control. It's not going to do too much damage, not like a vehicle going down the I-5 at about 80 miles an hour. But you know that's going to happen. We're going to have driverless cars, we're going to have driverless trucks, we're going to have driverless tractors, where everything's going to be driverless. And when that happens, a lot of jobs are going to go away. And when those jobs go away and a robot or some driverless technology is managing that vehicle, technically the price of whatever they're delivering should go down, because now they have, you know, the expenditure of a robot, but over time, you know, the robot depreciates, but that should be cheaper than having a person do it. And it should be cheaper because the robot doesn't get tired. The robot doesn't have to take a break every, you know, 4 or 5 hours. The robot doesn't have to stop for lunch. The robot doesn't have to get paid overtime. You know, all these things that the robot can do that people can't do, and that will drive the cost of everything down. But why things are going down, guess what? The price of everything is going up. Why? Because we have inflation, because we're borrowing every penny that is created, every penny that's paid to anybody is created, and that's causing inflation. But the real reason why they like inflation is because of the psychological reason for inflation. The psychological reason for inflation is that people want to see the prices increase. Because obviously, if you own assets, you want to see price increases. That gives people incentive to keep starting businesses, to keep buying houses, to keep buying rentals. Because every time you buy something like that in inflationary times, the psychology grows. You keep everything gets more expensive, so you do more. So that's kind of like been a driving force behind our economy, and that's why you'll never see, even though you get some of these people that call for deflation and prices to crash, they'll never crash for very long. Just long enough for you psychologically to feel like there's a real game going on here, but there isn't a real game going on. The game is rigged, and the rigging of the game is that there will always be inflation, because that's the way. It's like gravity. The only way we can have money is through inflation, because it has to be printed and borrowed, and of course there's a cost to that. So there's always going to be massive inflation. They just every now and then, every few years, you know, throw a monkey wrench into everything, and you know, drive the house prices down. They drive Bitcoin down. They drive everything down. So yeah, that's the reason why we'll always have inflation, because it's baked into the system. The economics have nothing to do with it. I mean, they would probably create massive inflation, because the more inflation they create, the more control they create. Because if you can't get a job, guess what? Then now you get a check from the government. You get some sort of a stimulus check or something like that. So then that makes the control even greater. So people that tell me that, well, hey, we can't have a digital currency, Federal Reserve, Fed's currency, it doesn't really matter, because the direction of the game is going towards where they will have control over everything, even if there's a federal digital, a central bank digital currency or not, because eventually it's going to get to the point where nobody can afford anything. We're getting to that point right now here in the area I live in, and also in Los Angeles. In this area that I live in, a typical family house, not a nice house, just a typical house, is probably close to $1 million. And up in LA, you can buy $1 million house, maybe even a $2 million house, drive a block or two, and you'll be inundated with homeless people. So literally, these $1 million homes are intermingled with tons of people that are living on the streets. So that's the direction we're going. And this is going to get more and more that way. Also, you know, I was thinking about technology, and I was thinking that this will even affect even the jobs that are the very best. And I was thinking about when I had my first heart surgery. And on the table, right before they put me under, the doctor says, well, I got to give you some information, some disclaimers here. He goes, you could die in this surgery. And I'm thinking, I'm on the bed, they're ready to put the mask over me. It was a great time to tell me I could die in this surgery. And he goes, yeah, because we have to pierce your heart chamber, and that has to be done precisely. And if I miss it by the fractions and fractions and fractions and fractions of a millimeter, I can't even remember how many it was, how close it was, but you'd instantly die. I would have been dead on the table. There's nothing they could have done. It would have been instant death. If he would have just had a bad day and missed that poke between the heart chambers. And after he told me that, then he went on to tell me the story about the guy, the main guy in this area, La Jolla. If anybody knows this area, La Jolla is a very expensive area. Probably $5 million houses in La Jolla. Did that. He's actually getting towards the end of his surgery. He'd been the guy that had educated all the people in this procedure. It's called an oblation. And at the end of his, surgical career, he actually mispierced the heart, killed a guy on a table, and that was the last surgery he ever did. Lost his license. So, I'm thinking to myself, probably in the future, there will be machines that are going to do this surgery, this surgical procedure I had, simply because it's going to be, think about it. If you can put somebody on a table and precisely put them under with all the different sensors and everything like that, so they wouldn't move, and then if you had this machine that could pierce the heart, but do it precisely every single time, never make a mistake, you wouldn't lose anybody in this operation. So even people like very trained surgeons, doctors, that do these delicate surgeries, that's going to be in the future maybe done by robots and different kind of machines, rather than doing it by somebody that can make a mistake, like the guy told me right before I went into heart surgery. So that's the direction we're going. We're going into an area where everything is going to be cheaper, but at the same time, everything's going to be more expensive. Because the difference between what they save with the technology, they will just spend and control more by creating more dollars and more money. Like I did the other night, if you watch my video where I folded the paper, I think 50 times in on itself, you'd reach to the moon. Nobody ever believes that until they actually research it. Just like what I'm telling you right now, research it, please. You will find out the more time, more money, more creation of inflation that they have, and God only knows how much it is now, the harder it is to ever get over that. And I love the politicians that will say something about, we want to pay off the deficit, we want to pay off the national debt. If you hear a politician say that, the guy's a liar. He's an absolute criminal liar, and he should never be running for office, because he's just telling you something that he knows is a lie. The other thing that they do, in fact, I saw someone here the other day, they're trying to get $21 an hour minimum wage here in California. And somebody had a little table out in front of one of these businesses I go to, and he said, "Stop inflation. Fight the $21 an hour minimum wage." Well, I thought that was really funny, because I was thinking to myself, guy, you don't even understand inflation. Inflation is going to happen if we have $21 an hour minimum wage or not. So they always try to make you think that the money that our government spends is like in a vault someplace, like Fort Knox. And every time we spend a little money, the government spends a little money, they have to go to Fort Knox, bring it out of Fort Knox, turn it into dollars, and there's only so much, there's a finite amount of money that's in Fort Knox. And when that all gets spent up, then our government goes bankrupt. Well, that's not the case at all. The Fort Knox thing was really a great publicity stunt. There probably wasn't ever any gold in it to begin with. The second thing is that money is not finite. Money is infinite. They created infinite money through the Federal Reserve and inflation. And the same is basically true in crypto. And the dirty little secret in crypto is that if you have a smart contract coin, altcoin, all you have to do is write a little code, and you can have as many tokens as you want. That's all you have to do. That's why a lot of people like Bitcoin, because Bitcoin has a fixed number of tokens that are ever going to be outstanding or ever be created, which is 21 million. And I don't think they can change that. That's hard-coded into the protocol, because Bitcoin's a little different system. It doesn't have a smart contract platform like that altcoins do. So a lot of people don't like the altcoins because they can create as many tokens as they want to create just by a little line of code. They can create as many tokens as they want. But think about it this way. If you ever want to have a digital currency that is world reserve currency, it can't be Bitcoin. Because if you inflated Bitcoin the way our government inflates Bitcoin, our money, Bitcoin being finite, not infinite, you would, after a certain period of time, Bitcoin would be 5, 10, 15, $20 million a Bitcoin, because of how much money is being created. So Bitcoin would be absolutely go to the moon. It's like a piece of paper folded on itself. But if you wanted to use an altcoin, like EOS, you could continue to create money, but if you did it, you could do it on the blockchain, on the digital blockchain, and then that would all be, something that people could see because it's public information on a blockchain. You have access to the digital blockchain. So in a way, it's not that the altcoins are worse; they're just more like our currency that we have, that we use every day in our everyday lives. The dollar and all the other fiat currencies that we use around the world. This is what our economy is about, and this is why there's secrets that people don't understand. What they don't understand is that money's not finite. Money is infinite, and that we borrow money, and all the money that we borrow is how our country continues to operate. And the psychology behind it is an incentive for people to continue to grow and build because they see prices go up. So if I'm a businessman and I see somebody create a product and they have $10 million, $20 million, $50 million, $100 million in sales, guess what? That's incentive for me to create a product and have $100 million in sales, or $10 million in sales, or even $1 million in sales. But if it was the other way around, technology was allowed to bring the cost of everything down because everything's getting cheaper through technology, and somebody creates a business and all of a sudden they're making $1 million in sales. Well, next year, even though the business is growing 25-30%, maybe the price or the amount of money that the sales they have goes down to maybe $500,000. Well, psychologically, you're thinking, I'm not doing as well. But really you are, because that $500,000 will buy more than the $2 million or $3 million or $30 million or $100 million that you would under the inflationary system. But they keep you hidden from the truth. They keep the truth hidden from you, because if they don't hide the truth from you, and as the prices go down, but the buying power goes up, you'll think that the economy is stagnant or going backwards, or we're in deflationary times, and that I won't try as hard or I won't, do much because everything's going down in value. So we've been brainwashed to think that as prices increase, we need to increase our activity, increase our energy to do something to create more and more money. But the problem with all this is, and we're reaching this very quickly today, is that we're getting to a point right now where there's getting to be a huge difference between people that have something and people that don't have something. Like I talked about houses in this area, $1 million. That's great if your family owns a house, or you own a house, and you've owned a house for back in the day when it was maybe $100,000 a house instead of $1 million a house. But for the young people, somebody that's just coming out of college, that's got a huge student loan debt, and they want to go out and buy a home, guess what? That's out of their reach. They can't buy a home because it's too expensive. Even if you're making great money, you'd have to be making $300,000-$400,000 a year to afford a house in Southern California and be able to do it, in a short period of time. Maybe you saved over a long period of time, but if you're saving over a long period of time, you got to be doing something with that money to keep ahead of a 10% inflation. That's about what inflation is right now. Could be 20%. We don't know. It's been hidden from us. So, how much money you got to make? You got to make hundreds of thousands of dollars. You make $340,000. You're going to pay 50-60% tax, and then you're going to have to, also compensate for the fact that you got 10-15% inflation. So your inflation rate is going to be out of this world. So, yeah, that's the problem. The problem is a person can never be able to afford anything under these kind of conditions. So eventually the government will have to step in and say, hey, we're going to have to make it so people can afford a home. So what will we do? We'll create even more money so that we can give people money to buy a home. And then when they do that, the price of houses will be $2 million, $3 million, $5 million, $10 million. They could be $20 million. And that's why this game that we're playing isn't going to work. And eventually, everybody's probably going to be on some sort of universal basic income, UBI, because it's talked about quite often. But eventually, that's probably what's going to happen, because people just can't keep up with the cost of inflation and the prices they face. So until that happens, and I know probably will happen someday, probably the only monitor you can have, on my mind, that can kind of predict true inflation would be Bitcoin or physical gold. Physical gold has to be mined out of the ground. There's a cost to that. As a cost of diesel fuel goes up, as a cost of machinery goes up, those big caterpillars and trucks that they use to mine the gold, and the gold price has to go up too to pay for the mining of the gold. The same thing with Bitcoin. As the price of everything goes up, energy goes up, electricity goes up, the Bitcoin becomes more expensive, and they're finite. Gold is finite, and so is Bitcoin. But the problem with what's going on with Bitcoin right now and gold is that they are highly manipulated. And that's another dirty little secret about cryptocurrencies. And I will tell you this right now from my own experience. When you see these exchanges and you see the volume of the coin, let's say coin has a $1 billion market cap, and when you see the volume, and maybe there's $30 million of the volume a day, that is completely bogus. Most of these cryptocurrencies, that volume that you see is completely made up. There is very little volume in most of these cryptocurrencies. Very, very little volume, including Bitcoin. So they're highly manipulated, and there's very little volume. I think they're very thinly traded. Most all cryptocurrencies. When you see stuff on CoinGecko and all that other stuff, don't believe the amount of volume that they're showing for those cryptocurrencies. There's not that much money being traded around, especially with real people and real bank accounts and real money. So the crypto market is highly manipulated by the amount of volume that is being traded, and it's highly manipulated by the fact that you can create cryptocurrency with a smart contract platform. So you can't really take those into account. But if they're ever going to use a cryptocurrency for world reserve currency, they'll have to use something that's a smart contract platform, like EOS or Ethereum. They can't use Bitcoin because Bitcoin would be too realistic, it would be too sensitive to the fluctuations in the amount of inflation, the amount of money created, and people would see it in the Bitcoin price. So keep that in mind. So these are the dirty little secrets that they don't tell you. Nobody tells you. They won't tell you this in school. They won't tell you this in the media, and nobody thinks about it ever, because they just accept it for what it is. They just think of money as a finite resource. There's only so much of it. It's someplace put away. One final story before I leave you tonight, because I have a lot of stories in this area. But one year, one of my sons, I think my middle son, had a trip up to Sacramento. And of course, the trip was to see the Capitol, the California state government, the capital where everything takes place. That wasn't the biggest phonied up sideshow I'd ever seen in my life. That was back when Schwarzenegger was governor. And it's funny because they took you throughout the Capitol and they showed you all the different offices and places and where they made the bills and everything like that. And then they showed you around to the different places. And one of the places they showed you was the California Treasury. And of course there was no treasury. It was like there were mannequins. They had a little bit of rope, like a roped off, like in a movie theater. And there were some mannequins, and there was like some gold bars, fake gold bars, in this fake vault. And they said, well, this is, now we don't do it this way. It's the money's in other banks, and we don't put it all here in the treasury and all this. Give you some phonied up story. But it was all theater to make you think that the government actually had, even back then, gold bars sitting in a vault someplace that were California gold bars, and that's how California ran its budget, is by spending these gold bars, and that's what it was, is that there was this, and they want you to believe that that's the way it was, or that's the way it's run today. They actually said that, well, what we do today, it's digital, but we keep the money in different banks. We don't keep it here at California State Treasury. So anyway, the other thing was kind of interesting. I think I've told this story before, but we got to see Governor Schwarzenegger's office with Maria Shriver, and it was funny because we walked into the office and nobody was there. They'd been telling us the whole trip, well, we're probably going to get a chance to meet Schwarzenegger and Maria Shriver. They're here, and they're waiting for our tour to show up, and blah 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 blah. Well, it just so happens we had this nice little tour guide, and she was very young, but she was very much, you could see, a team player. Someone who's going to go along with whatever story they tell. So all throughout the whole tour, she was telling us about, hey, we're going to get a chance to see the governor, the governor, whatever they call it. The governor, he's Terminator, the governor, or whatever they call it. I can't remember how they refer to it. But just so happens that right before we got to his office, He had left early for some reason. And then so had Murray Shriver. They had both left early that day. They had to go someplace. So we didn't get to see them. So we were kind of disappointed. But when I walked into the office, I knew that neither one of them had been there that day. That office didn't look like it had ever been used by anybody. It was such a sterile office. There wasn't any papers. It was all very sterile. There was just a picture of Arnold there and a picture of Maria. And they didn't have anything there that looked like it had ever been used. Well, as we were leaving the tour, there was an older gentleman there, and he had been a tour guide there for some time. And he kind of laughed as we were leaving, because I was still talking to him. He was going, they tell every tour that same story, that you're going to get a chance to meet Schwarzenegger. But he says the guy is never here. He says he has to show up, I think, once a month for a vote. He comes in the back way, goes up a private elevator, goes into the floor, makes a signature, does whatever he has to do. He has to, either veto a vote or endorse it or accept it or whatever. He says, that's it. Then he gets back in his car, leaves, and you don't see him. Somebody's having a good time over here. So that's it. So you never saw Schwarzenegger there in any other way other than the fact that he had to be there, mandated by law for just this one period a month, and every other, then he was never there any other time. He said, you're lucky. I think he said he'd been there. This is towards the end of Schwarzenegger's term. He said he'd only seen him once or twice. And the guy was there every day giving tours. So that's the way we are being sold all this, this deception, that things are really kind of run. That's why this is a game of psychology and a game of telling people what you want to hear and creating an environment that keeps you active and makes you want to do more because you've got to keep up with inflation and do all this stuff. So we're really kind of pawns in the big scheme of things. So don't let anybody tell you that anything that's being done in the government right now is causing too much inflation, or that they're fighting inflation, or that they're going to pay down the debt or anything like that. It's just all a big game. I appreciate you watching.